All right, the offseason in Detroit. The leader in the clubhouse with the number one pick heading into the lottery. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into their offseason from a video perspective. Their offseason article is on ESPN.com. There is one document for all the teams that are eliminated. There are not 30 documents or 30 separate articles this year, and you can go on ESPN.com to read about the Detroit Pistons. This was a team, I wasn't ready to go to Las Vegas and put money on it, but if you ask me, pick one team from last year that had a chance to compete for the play-in spot based off the last 20 games of the regular season, who would that be? And I would say it would be Detroit, based on how competitive they were. One of the few lower point differentials, didn't get blown out. Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, your young core back. Add those pieces to that. You get Bogdanovic in the offseason. And this team should have been competing for a playoff spot. Instead, 20, 23. And now 17 wins in the last 3 seasons for, I'm not even going to give them the retooling, the rebuilding Detroit Pistons. Second lowest win total in franchise history. And of course, a lot of that has to do with Cade Cunningham only playing 12 games. 29 different starting lineups for head coach Dwayne Casey, who's no longer the head coach and is now in the plum position of working in the front office. And that is where the offseason in Detroit starts, as far as the Pistons getting it right with the next head coach. There is no budget or salary cap when it comes to the hiring a coach. You're not restricted by the tax mid-level or cap space. You can go out and find the best, and you can provide that coach with the best resources. Look at Utah and Will Hardy. Joe Mazzulla in Boston. Now, of course, that was a different situation. Mike Brown in Sacramento. If you get it right with the right coach, good things happen. If you don't, you are going to be sitting in the bottom of the Eastern Conference standing for the foreseeable future. I don't care how many lottery picks you have. So it starts with the head coach. And what does that head coach inherit? What will he inherit? He will inherit 2 draft picks, a 14% chance at the number 1 pick and the 31st pick in the draft, which is basically a late first round picks. So you get 2 picks in the top 31, including a 14% chance at drafting the franchise player that you thought you had with Cade Cunningham 2 years ago. Again, Invictor. The number 1 pick 2 out of 3 years. And is that enough to get you out of the basement of the standings? We will see. As you can see, there are resources to build the roster is right behind me, right? We talked about the draft. Getting it right with the head coach. They have the potential of cap space, $40 million, but that costs you Alex Burks, who has a team option. So we're looking at $30 million for the Pistons entering the offseason. Still enough to go out and become a spender? Or do you want to follow the script from last year and become a facilitator again? Remember, Burks, Nerlens Noel helped lead the way for New York to go out and sign Jalen Brunson. Picked up a couple seconds in the deal here. But is there a process that you need to start putting a competitive roster on the court? And let's face it, this group is not competitive at all. You also have the Bogdanovic contract. He's got 2 years left. You can move that. We saw them hesitant at the trade deadline as far as not wanting to move it. You certainly would want to hold on to it, see if you can put it together a roster that can compete for a play-in spot. Who knows what happens in the Eastern Conference? Unlikely top 6 unless you really hit gold in the draft in free agency. You've got your own free agents to worry about. I don't see Detroit bringing any of this group back. I mean, we can go through the list here. Besides Burks, yes, Diallo, Joseph, Magruder, I don't see it. Cut bait and move on with that group here. We talked about cap space. The priority in the offseason is the head coach. What do you do with your bigs? What happens if you do get the number 1 pick and you already have Isaiah Stewart and Marvin Bagley, James Wiseman, Jalen Duren? Who out of that group is out? I would think it would have to be Marvin Bagley, but he's got 2 years and $28 million left on his contract. I think you had gotten some good minutes from Wiseman at center, but you also have Jalen Duren. That's when we go back to, did it make sense trading a big for that you exchange in a wing in Sadiq Bey? Now you've got a Wiseman who is extension eligible. Can you get him on a team-friendly, cheap contract, 3 for 30 years? That's probably what I'm only offering James Wiseman entering the offseason here. So there are decisions for Detroit. You also have Killian Hayes, Isaiah Stewart, Isaiah Livers. Burks is a extension eligible if that option is exercised. Team needs starts with Cunningham, right? When he's on the court, as you saw last year in the second half, 21 points, 6 rebounds, 6.5 assists. Only 6 rookies since 1976-77 to put those numbers together. He is a stud. He's got to be on the court healthy. Their future draft assets are limited. That's why you have to get it right this year. You can keep on drafting in a lottery all you want, but you got to start getting impact players, and I think you did last year with Ivy and Duren. You owe New York a top 18 protected first in 2018. So that is the state of the Detroit Pistons, right? Starts with the draft. It starts with the head coach now that Dwayne Casey is no longer in charge. It goes to the draft. Certainly, if you get the number 1 pick, you are staying. You've got that second round pick to find another player. Even if you move back at 3 or 4, you will still find a good player. Not going to be Victor, but you will still find a good player. And how do you take another step of development? They're not in the situation. They're not Orlando. Let's face it. They're not the Orlando Magic. They're not the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? Orlando played games that meant something down the stretch. They played competitive games. They didn't ride out the string. Oklahoma City is a playing team. They have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Detroit doesn't. How do you build up good winning habits? And I think hiring the right coach, it starts with hiring the right coach. So, head coach, the draft, what do you do with cap space as far as are you a buyer? Or are you going to use that to take back contracts? Extension candidates, does it make sense to lock in Wiseman, or do you use his 4th year to kind of continue the audition that we saw since they got him in a trade? And hey, there's been some good things here. Certainly, they've used him in a different way than he was in Detroit. 13 points, 9 rebounds. You can see them, extending him. But for me, I would give Jalen Duren 30 minutes and let him be my center of the future. And if a backup big costs me $8-10 million and Wiseman wants to bite on that's fine. But I'm not committing $15 to $16 million for James Wiseman based off the second half of the season here. So those are your big decisions. You see it over my shoulder. You got all those former first-round picks. Hayes, Duren, Stewart, who else? Wiseman. I mean, it is a young group in Detroit. But for me, it starts with hiring the right coach. And no offense to Dwayne Casey, I didn't feel like the timeline of Casey kind of lined up kind of where this roster is right now. I will say this. It's time to move the needle, right? Like, you can't, this is why people want to institute a limit on drafting in the lottery or drafting in the top 3 based on kind of where Detroit is. Like, you can't win 17, 18 games next year again. Like, you've got to show improvement. What is improvement? 34 wins, 35 wins here. And there is an opportunity to do that, but of course it starts with a healthy Cunningham, getting it right in the draft, getting it right at head coach, figuring out what you want to do with cap flexibility.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.